This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
And hello, everyone. Downrigger Dale right here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. And we've got him back, as promised. Matt from Mon-Dak Marine in Glasgow, Montana, has joined us. And kind of excited for this one because Matt comes so highly recommended by so many people all across the state about how to rig your boat properly. And this is such an important thing for all of us, in that you can have all these bells and whistles on your boat, but if you don't know how to use them, they're worthless. And I can't tell you how many people I know that you get on their boat to go fishing with them and you say, hey, well, what about that? Can you check that thing and that thing? I really don't know how to work it. I only can use that setting. And that's a shame. And that's where you need a guy like Matt to really take you through so you get the most out of all your accessories. Captain, you were one that used to have that problem where you had all this cool stuff on your boat. You didn't know how to work any of it. And this man turned the light on for you.
Well, I don't think I'm a unique in that regard.
No, you're not.
And Matt will probably attest to that. I'm sure they have. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have somebody like you on the boat that just keeps punching dials and buttons.
I've never
and
done
turning
such
things,
a thing.
And you don't know what you even got. I mean, I had one buddy of mine that was on my boat years ago, and he changed me from miles per hour to, was it kilometers?
Yeah, kilometers.
Yeah, and I thought, there's something wrong with my, are we going 40 miles an hour? That's when I had
this
a boat.
boat's really fast.
So, anywho, the thing that Matt recognized, and boy, and he found out real quick, what an absolute service this is, and probably he wishes he could clone himself a little bit, is that he started a company when he's working at Shields as the supervisor for the fishing department called Go Fish Installations, because Rigger, he recognized that there's guys like me out there that, yeah, we're going to go ahead and buy this sonar for $2,000, but then it's going to be, I'll see the guy about 4 or 5 months later, and how's that sonar working? Well, all I can get is see the depth, and I can see some fish on there, or the structure. And you get on the phone with them on the phone, and you walk them through the sonar when I'm actually on the water. You've done that with me.
Sure, yeah. I think the key, like you said, the frustration part, because if you get frustrated, a lot of people just throw their hands up in the air and say, all right, I'm done. And you don't feel very good when you've spent a lot of money on electronics or boats or whatever the case is. It's all just about being efficient with the time we have on the water. And, I take a lot of pride in being able to help a customer with a unit, regardless of where they bought it or who put it in. When they have an issue, I can usually walk through most scenarios with them over the phone, and ask a couple of questions, and based off of their answers, I can kind of get them lined out. Now, not always, because sometimes it's just a power issue or something like that. But usually it's not real tough to fix. I guess I'm fortunate enough to have been through enough scenarios to where I can get people headed in the right direction, but I do take a lot of pride in that. And I think customers appreciate, a phone call on a Saturday when they're on the water and they don't have any water temperature or their side imaging isn't working or something like that.
What's amazing to me is that you actually will, answer your phone on a Saturday or a Sunday. And that's happened from, I'm sure, like I'll look at the number and I'll go, I don't know who this is, but I'm sure you get that and you go, well, it must be a customer that's frustrated.
Yeah. I see the captain's number come up and I say, did you turn it on?
Yeah.
Is it turned on? Did you push the power button, Captain? No, I'm just teasing you.
Well, the one that we hear quite often is, Captain, put the gun down. Do not shoot the electronics on the boat.
Yeah.
So one of the things that when he's rigging a boat at Mon-Dak Marine, one of the things that he does he recommends it to do it, and you're going to have to pay to have him do it, but he wants to go on the water with you for like an hour and a half to 2 hours or whatever, and walk you through the electronics, and you're welcome to videotape it, I guess, as well.
Sure. Oh yeah. We get the locators or trolling motors or the whole system put in your boat, and all these things it'll do from the research that you've done, and you're excited about seeing fish on side imaging for the first time, or if you invested in a 360 or a forward facing sonar and what all of the YouTube videos look like, and you just want your system to look like that. It's not always possible to make it look the same, of course, but I just know that I can shorten your learning curve substantially if we can get a little bit of time in your boat on the water while you're pushing the buttons. I've never had an on the water training not be productive. Most of the time the customers tell me to stop because they get a little overwhelmed.
Right. And
I start that out with when your brain is full, just tell me, because you might hear me, but you're not listening anymore. And even if you're taking pictures of the settings or your fishing partner or wife or husband are there listening as well, that's fine, because then eventually you're going to forget something, or how did we do this, or how did we do that? And maybe the other person, I've had people take a notepad and take notes. That's fine. And it doesn't have to be just a one-time shot. There's a lot of times I'll do 3 or 4 trainings with the same customer as we develop, go from the beginning to the intermediate to some of the advanced stuff that you surely don't want to talk about on the first time you're learning how to turn on your graph.
I remember when I bought some of those downriggers that you can do, they call it jigging and all different, cannon downriggers. And Rigger and I had them on the boat, and we were at Flathead Lake. And how many fuses did we go through? We had no idea what we were doing, but, and he's got the manual out, and he's trying to read it. We actually got Bill Zaratka on the phone because he has some of those. I don't even know what they're
Digitrolls.
Digitrolls, yeah. Digitrol 10s, I think.
Sure.
And we got backlash on the cable.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was a nightmare.
And that all happened after we had lost 2 downrigger balls. So
yeah.
Sounds like a good trip.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to hire somebody like Matt to be able to, figure out what's going on when he's on the boat itself. So let's talk about rigging the boat. Every electronics company, Lowrance, Humminbird, and Garmin, and you have access to all of them, they all claim to be the best.
Of course.
They have Panoptics for Garmin. They have the Mega Live for Humminbird. What is the one called for Lowrance?
Active Target.
Active Target. Those are that's not even a sonar. That's an additional feature that you can actually see you can see the fish out there, and then you can see your lure supposedly going to the fish, or the fish going towards the lure.
Sure.
Besides, should we start with like the basic sonars? Because there's so many things in electronics to get into. And then with Humminbird, you got the 360.
Sure.
That's another one. What do you recommend?
Well, I think one of the things that we do really well at Mon-Dak is when a customer purchases, we're just going to say electronics, whether trolling motor or sonars, is we're going to get their boat at the store and they're going to drop it off. And I have them there, the captive audience. We uncover it and say, okay, let's jump in your boat. Where do you want this? Because I know where I would put it if it was mine.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that's where you want it. But if you tell me, oh, just do it as if it was yours, which is pretty common, well, that's fine. I can do that. But it's really nice when the customer says, well, I wanted this graph over on front of my passenger side so that my wife can stare at one too. Well, I would have never put it there unless you told me that. Right. So it comes down to what are they putting on? And let's just say they want to put on 2 graphs in the bow and 1 on the dash. I got to look at power, and that's a very long conversation. If you want to get into some details, we can. But ultimately, nothing works great or the way it's supposed to without the dedicated power for that unit.
And what do you mean by that, dedicated power? I mean, every boat's got power, but
sure,
you're talking about batteries.
Yep, absolutely, batteries. Most boats come rigged from the manufacturers, not all, but most, with all of the power coming off of the starting battery. And a lot of times those batteries, they'll work okay if you're adding smaller graphs. But if we're adding a whole entire system or we think we're going to add more to the system down the road, I really strongly recommend a dedicated battery that I call a house battery that is just running nothing but electronics. It allows them to perform the way that they're supposed to. Obviously, we need to add another onboard charger to it and add it to the system and all the bells and whistles there. But if you're going to invest, even if it's a couple $100, all the way up to some of these graphs these days with the whole entire system, I mean, it's really not that big a deal to put $10,000 with electronics on a boat. And if they're just not getting the power they need, you're going to be frustrated.
Okay, so I want to talk about the power in just a moment, Matt, and I want you to think about when you recommend a lithium battery and when you don't recommend a lithium battery.
Sure.
But before we do that, we need to chat with Rigger here about the Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Rigger, if you're looking for a truck bed, they carry CM truck beds and Diamond C trailers and accessories as well. They're in Missoula. They've been in business a long time. They service what they sell. What else can you tell us about Josh and the whole gang there?
Well, we could do, and one of these days we are going to do an entire show just on them. But give you an example, and this is where I've talked about Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer before. Of there's the roadside guys that sell trailers. There's the big box store guys that have a few trailers or truck beds laying around the parking lot. And then there's a dealer who actually knows all about it. It's their livelihood. It's what they have to know. And that's Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. From their service department, which is second to none, to their parts department, even the best trailer, the best truck bed in that is going to need parts at times. You want to be able to have someone that comes in and says, "Oh, hey, Captain, good to see you again. Hey, how's that trailer working that we talked about? Well, I'm having this. Well, let me look up in your file. Okay, yeah, you need this, and this." That's what Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is all about. All the way to financing. If you want to get into a really big trailer that is going to service everything you're doing and hauling you to rodeo and back and everything else, well, again, these are the experts. So that's why I say don't waste a lot of time trying to do all this do-it-yourself when you're not going to spend really any more money and you're going to have a pro doing it.
All right, that's a Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula. They carry Diamond C trailers and accessories and CM truck beds. Go to their website at rmtte.com. The number is 406-549-4243. They're in Missoula. Okay, batteries. I mean, the world keeps getting more complicated. You have lithium batteries now. You have AGM batteries, and you have lead core batteries. you're looking at the cost of a lead core battery. You could buy 3 of those. Well, actually, you could buy 6 of those for 1 lithium battery.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, batteries, just like everything else, have really gone up in price. But I think that there are some times when certain batteries outperform other batteries. And I guess we could start with a starting battery, because every boat needs a starting battery for the most part. If there's room, I really strongly recommend 31 AGMs. Okay, that's the gel-filled battery. That's what is actually recommended by most motor manufacturers. A lot of guys are trying to run lithiums, or they will run a lithium, and it'll work. But people don't realize that the alternator on all these different motors charge at a different rate, and that's what's charging that battery. An AGM or a wet cell battery will definitely take that from all these big outboards. But lithiums charge at a lot smaller voltage. So you have to be real careful that you don't smoke a lithium battery in your boat if you do decide to make it your cranking battery. Now, there are some lithium batteries out there that, let's just say Mercury, for example, they do say you can use this lithium battery, but it's their own brand of lithium battery. It's a tracker battery. It's got the big fluorescent green top on them, and they're great. It's just you have to watch out, make sure nothing gets warm.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the reasons Ben Coda came out with a battery charger, and they've had, 2-bank battery chargers, 4-bank, 5-bank battery chargers. They came out with a setting for lithium. They have a setting for AGM, and they have a setting for lead core.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think that's a great thing to have, because you're going to have, I think, eventually a lithium battery in your boat. And I've carried lithium batteries in my boat for a couple, 3 years. And one of the big issues has always been, up until I got this battery charger, and I'm using it this year, is that I'm having the AGM setting on the Minn Kota charge that lithium battery. I don't think it does as good a job as one that is for a lithium battery.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. You can charge a lithium battery with the AGM setting. It just is still pumping out more voltage, or more amps than what is the most efficient charge on a lithium. The Minn Kota, it's called a PCL, are the Minn Kota chargers now, to where they do have those different settings. And it's nice to have that charging ability. Not to say you have to have all lithium batteries in your boat, because that's a giant expense, but maybe every year you add one, or you're going to do your trolling motor system. To have that charging system in there already ready to go is a real nice feature.
Matt, just hearing all these different things coming at me, you start to go, wow, there's just so many options and so many things. Can you give us some advice on where we should start? So I'll put this scenario out, that I've got a new boat, or a boat that's new to me. I have not made an investment in any of my electronics yet. What do you recommend I do to kind of get my head screwed on straight to where do I go to look, and how do I map all that out, so when I come to you, I kind of have an idea of what I would want, and then you can steer me in the right direction from there?
Sure. I would probably start with you getting in your boat, where I would ask you some questions on, can you find your starting battery? Is there another battery sitting next to it, or is there room to put another battery sitting next to it? That would lead me to believe that it either has a house battery or it doesn't.
Okay.
And then I would say, do you know where your trolling motor batteries are? Yep. Can you open up the drawer and tell me how many you have? You tell me you have 2. All right. That's a 24-volt system. It allows me to be able to start building that system that is going to perform and work the way it's supposed to. And like we mentioned earlier, I would say, all right, how many graphs are you thinking about running? I'm really going to get after it. I want to run 4, 2 on the front and 2 on the dash. Instantly, I know for a fact we got to have a house battery.
Okay.
Because if we decide to tap into the cranking battery, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to start your big motor and go home.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's the worst scenario ever, right? We just want to be able to start our motor and go home. Not to mention the graphs aren't going to work the way they're supposed to as far as clarity and brightness. I really would do that if that makes sense.
Okay, and then just to follow up on that a little bit, how do we, make room? Because what's going to happen. I get a few things in, and I've got trained by you, and I go, oh, I'm loving this, but gee, my buddy's got this new deal here that I got to have. Is there a way to kind of plan ahead and provide to be able to add on and on without having to tear the whole system down and redo everything again?
Absolutely. When we have a house battery in a system, I absolutely make sure that it has dedicated bonded wire, heavy gauge wire. 8 is my favorite, to a dedicated fuse panel under the dash.
Okay.
Once I have power established and a common a spot to run everything, we can build anything you want. Perfect. But it starts with that foundation of having good, clean power to its own fuse panel with spade fuses, good, clean power. And we can piggyback power to the bow and put another fuse panel in if we need to. But once we get that started with that house battery and good bonded wire, we can just about build anything.
Okay, so now let me step it up a little bit. You got the starting motor battery, and you want to make sure that's isolated just for the big motor, I think. That's my opinion.
Absolutely.
And then you have your house battery. Now I'm going to throw in a Mega Live, or I'm going to throw in a Panoptics from Garmin, Mega Live from Humminbird, or a Lowrance.
Active Target.
They take a lot more juice.
They do.
Okay, so what do we do?
Well, we need to make sure that our house battery can support all of that power. Do not ever put a cranking battery as a house battery. It doesn't have what's called reserve capacity. You can get away with a wet cell, 24, 27s, 31s. Ultimately, the lithiums are going to give you the longest run time. I put a lot of 135 amp hour Dakota lithiums is what I run in boats that are just dedicated to nothing but electronics. And you'd have to work real hard to run it down in a fishing day. They're pretty sweet. They're wide open until they die. Anything lithium just gives you full power until they're completely toast. Mm-hmm. So when you start adding any of these forward-facing sonars, they do require a lot of power. And most people are looking at them on fairly large graphs, which the bigger the graph size, the more power it takes. There are a few tricks you can do to adjust what's called backlight and things like that to reduce power on your graph. But you got to start with a good foundation. And if you're going to spend the money on a lithium battery, double check what their warranty is, because, you're going to drop anywhere from $700 to $1,500 on a single battery.
I think on that subject with the lithium battery, I think you need to double check on the warranty, but I also think you need to see where they're sold. You sell Dakota Lithium. So it's not, the warranty, if a battery goes bad and they bought the battery from you, you can bring it in there. And if you have one that, you can replace it, you're going to send it back.
Absolutely.
How that works.
Yep.
The other thing that people don't realize is that when you get into these sonars you're talking about, these 12-inch sonars, some of these sonars are bigger than my television set. They need voltage. And they need exact voltage. And if they don't get the voltage, they shut down. Mm-hmm. So that's where you want to dedicate. And that's where a guy like you, a professional like you, all the ins and outs. Now, they might be going through their checkbook and going, well, gee, I don't know. Well, if you don't know, then Matt will tell you that here's another option we can do.
We've got more realistic options for sure. That will allow you to get started in the right direction. Here's a little quick tip. If you've ever tried to start your big motor and all of your graphs turn off, that's the first indicator that you need a house battery. Mm. And I'll guarantee you about 95% of us out there will raise our hand because it's happened to every one of us. That just means you're getting real close to not being able to start your big motor.
Yeah. In fact, I remember Walleye Wayne and I one time we were fishing on Fort Peck, and it was over by Timber Creek. And that day we were catching some fish, and we had the live well running all day long. And we were catching some fish in a specific spot. So we stayed there all day long. Well, guess what? when we when we were going to start the big motor, it wouldn't start. What's going on here? Well, we had enough juice in the battery to start the kicker, and we ran the kicker, and the alternator charged the battery enough where we could eventually get that. Yeah, you don't want to be. That's 32 miles away from Hell Creek Marine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Matt. Now here's one that just always scares the hell out of me, and that is, we get into a guy's boat, and he's got all this new gear that he's added, and now he's saying, hey, and we're going to stop down from fishing. We'll have some blended drinks, so bring your blender, and we're going to wire this in, and don't worry about power, because I got my portable generator, and we're going to just pop that onto the system. That just scares the heck out of me. Is there a way to provide for that where we can have generated power as a backup, but be able to use it safely so we don't fry everything because, Bonnie Sue wanted to make margaritas on the boat?
Well, the thing about generators, right, is they do provide good, clean power, and you can plug your onboard chargers into a generator while you're using your units in the boat. But I just want to make sure that if your units meaning sonars, trolling motors, aren't installed correctly with inline fuses in certain locations and circuit breakers that are supposed to be doing their job, you could have a voltage drop or hike that for sure could smoke a graph. It just happens. And I don't know, there's onboard chargers on boats and generators on boats that work fine, but just make sure that you've got the correct circuit breakers and fuses on the positive sides to prevent any major issues.
Okay.
Rigger, maybe we can get away from alcohol for a moment. I know you like to talk about that a lot.
I was just going to blend a margarita. You two just go ahead.
So we're talking about sonars, and we're talking about, Mega Live and all these fancy sonars. Trolling motor. I would say, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you will. Minn Kota has got to be the most popular trolling motor brand, at least at Fort Peck.
Oh, yeah. Hands down, Minn Kota is actually probably nationwide still have a strong market share. Yeah.
And they come with shafts, different size of shafts. It used to be 60 inches was the longest shaft you could get. Now they come out with 72, which is great because an electric bow trolling motor doesn't work real well when the propeller is out of the water. And the big waves you get at Fort Peck. So then you have the Altera. Then you have the Tarova. I mean, the Altera is automatic deploy. You've seen the commercials where the guy puts his boat in the water and he walks off the dock and puts his electric trolling motor down. There's so many decisions to make when you're buying a boat. How would you recommend any of the decisions? I mean, what kind of qualifying questions do you have on those?
Well, the first thing that I would ask is, what have you used in the past? If they're familiar with the Alteras, and then I would say, well, how did you like it? What did you like? What did you not like about it? It doesn't really matter the model. If you had an issue with it, chances of you going back to it isn't your favorite. I might say, well, maybe it's a customer, husband, wife, and they're getting up in age, and I just know that it might not be real fun for them to manually put a Tarova in the water in waves if they happen to get caught out in the waves.
Even though it's fairly easy to deploy.
It is. It is. That just still means you have to go stand in the front of the boat, right, to put it in, whether it's an Ultrex or a Tarova. The Altera, right, the manual stow and deploy, people get nervous about that one because everybody's heard horror stories.
I was just going to say
they fixed a lot of
Matt.
those. Mm-hmm. They've fixed a lot of those, but a lot of that comes down to a power issue as well.
Yep.
They need to have a minimum 70 amp awesome plug-in system to make those work, and then keep them clean.
Okay, tell me about a 70 amp. When you say 70 amp plug-in system, I've got a 60 amp on my 3 electric, or on my 3 batteries, lithium batteries that I've got So you're saying 70. It needs a 70.
No, I think you're a little confused. That's a circuit breaker on
Oh.
your trolling motor system.
Okay.
The actual male-female plug-in that's usually on all boats, Marine Co. makes one that's a heavy-duty 70 amp
Yeah.
version, which means it's carrying a strong current the whole time. That Ulterra needs clean power to continue to stow and deploy when you push that button. So
Okay.
there's a few things we can do to help with less issues.
Yeah, and that's like going back to the sonar. It's the same thing. If
Yep.
it doesn't have the power, it's not going to operate the way it should.
Sure.
So you've got the trolling motor. You've got all the sonars put together. Some people have a Garmin and they have a Humminbird.
Mhm.
They have more graphs on their boat that it looks like NASA, is going to be taken off.
Yeah.
So when do you recommend that they get that? I hate to use the word fancy, but they get that fancy. I would think they'd be inviting problems by doing two different manufacturers and sonars.
No, it's pretty common these days for two different brands to be sitting side by side. And that's just fine. And people, first thing they think of is, oh man, am I going to get interference between frequencies? Are my graphs not going to be clean? Am I going to start having them malfunction? Most of the manufacturers actually send frequencies at a little bit different pulse. It's called chirp, and you can clean it up pretty nice. I'm not worried one bit about I've seen all three of them on boats before, and they work just fine. You just, again, have to set them up to not interfere with each other.
And so when they go to that and they say, I want to have a Garmin and a Humminbird, why would they want to have two different? Because like the Humminbird works with the Minn Kota electric trolling motor. You can, what do you call that? Do a network? What do you call that when you put everything together with the sonar and the trolling
the
motor?
one boat network?
Yeah.
Backing up just a hair, the Minn Kota trolling motors are indeed built by Johnson Outdoors, and they do have the Humminbird transducers in the universal sonar. But one of the questions that I need to ask a customer is, what type of sonars do you currently own? And if you say, oh, I've got a Lowrance, well, I know for a fact that I'm not going to sell you a Terova with built-in mega down imaging and link, because it's not going to match up to a Lowrance. It only works with Humminbird. So sometimes that's why you might see a Humminbird in the front of the boat and a Garmin, because maybe they want to use LiveScope Plus as their forward-facing sonar, and that's a Garmin system. But they absolutely love the follow the contour link side with the Lake Master chip from Humminbird. So,
there are, just like there's a Chevy guys and there's Ford guys, there's Lowrance guys,
sure,
there's Garmin guys, there's Humminbird guys. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back in the selection process.
Well, and one thing I want you to think about too, Matt, while we are taking a break here, is think about what would be a realistic starter budget for someone to get started in the world of electronics on their boat. So think a little bit on that too.
Trolling motor and graphs?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Trolling motor, graphs, and maybe a downrigger or two.
Okay. You got it.
And maybe a downrigger or two.
Yeah.
Well, you need at least two.
So let's talk a little bit about our friends. We're going to go from the Starship Enterprise of your boat to the simplistic world of wood. And getting back to making your house a home and making it unique for you. Now, the way to do that, in my opinion, is to let the house do the talking for you. And that's where Superior Hardwoods of Montana can do that. Their saying is, let us guide you through the woods, which is a clever saying, but it's actually very true in what Superior Hardwoods of Montana does. They're located in Missoula, just south of Missoula, right by the big Peak Athletics Center. And what they're going to be able to do is you can sit down, bring maybe some plans of that room or the home that you want to redecorate and say, I want this special, and here's some of the things. you will be amazed at the kind of accents and things they're going to bring to your home to turn it from a house into your home that says all about you. Captain, you did that with flooring. And I'll tell you what, you have never been happier than you have been with the floors you got from Superior Hardwood.
Well, I did do it with flooring, and what's interesting, Bernie, my wife and I, we went in there. They have a lot of different designs, as you can imagine, at Superior Hardwoods. And she goes, well, which one do you want? I go, I want that one. And we weren't in there but 30 seconds. She goes, well, that's the one I want too. And it was just amazing that we could agree on that. And then when we got it installed, they find the installer. This one was out of Miles City, and he did a great job. We're in Lewistown. They're in Missoula, but it did a great job. And I want to tell you something. Everybody that comes into that home that we have in Lewistown, they always compliment the floors to begin with.
Now,
and they don't say anything about my game mounts or anything else, just the flooring. They've got their heads down.
But real quick, tell us about the idea, because I know one of the first thoughts that some people have when they hear, well, wait a minute, you're living in Lewistown, but you got your flooring from Missoula Hardwoods in Missoula. Was that pretty seamless to have someone a ways away from you?
Yeah, because I dealt with Shannon. They got John, Corey, and Shannon there. Shannon does a great job. And then we coordinate everything. They give you how much it's going to cost and how you're going to get it shipped over there. If you want to ship it or come get it yourself. I mean, it's just pretty easy. And it was one of the easiest things we did in that house, and we totally gutted the inside of the house. So I would recommend them. Superior Hardwoods, John, Corey, Shannon. They're in Missoula, but you can get on their website, superior-hardwoods.com. Rigger, they need to go there because they will truly guide you through the woods.
Absolutely. They've even helped people that living in Hawaii remodel their homes. So they know how to do it no matter where you live. Now, let's get back to Matt here from Mon-Dak Marine. And we're talking about rigging your boat. And Matt, I know this is probably a tough question because, boy, there's so many choices to rig out our boat. But what would be a realistic starter budget for me if I come in and say, okay, Matt, I've got my new Yarcraft I bought from you, but now I really want to make it mine so that I got these cool gadgets and things so I can really outfish everybody. What's a realistic budget for me to think on?
That's a really tough question to answer on a realistic budget, just because everybody else's. My wife's realistic budget and my realistic budget are completely different, right?
There you go.
And all joking aside, they're really expensive. One, you just bought a new Yarcraft, so great, but you start dropping $3,000 on each graph, $3,000 on a trolling motor, and all these things. You don't have to do that. Okay. I think. Again, I have to ask the question of what size graph are you used to looking at? Because that's the reason why graphs start to climb in price is the bigger they get, the more money you're going to spend.
Right.
And that's just because of clarity. It's called vertical pixel. And for your money, again, I have to ask, where do you fish? And we're going to all assume that we're fishing Fort Peck, and I'm going to recommend a Humminbird. And we're talking about the one on the dash. And you might be nervous about side imaging, but I'm going to tell you that it's my second most relied upon tool in my boat. And here's why. We'll go through those scenarios. And then I'm going to say my 9s and 10s are my number one sellers. Okay. And that's because of clarity and price. So, it's $1,500 to $2,000 for a single graph. Okay. But that should be the most expensive graph, in my opinion, in your boat, because that's the one you're navigating off of. That's the one you're searching for fish off of. And that's the foundation of if we do indeed create that one boat network. And then, we move to the front and say, all right, I sit in this chair and can you see a 7? No. Okay. Can you see a 9? Oh, not as good as I thought I could. And because I've got them all at the store, you can physically sit in your chair and I can say, do you want to see a 15? Yeah, let's look at that. And you're like, holy moly, that thing's a giant. It's too big. We just kind of go that route. I never ask what's your budget? Because the customer will tell me yes or no based off of price, but I just don't want them to ever leave thinking that we took advantage of them and sold them something bigger than what they wanted.
Okay.
The pandemic we just all went through with the COVID and everything really caused havoc in the supply chain. I mean, the boating business was off the charts. Electronics were off the charts because they're putting in the boats. A lot of people had to wait for electronics if they can get them at all. You, however, have kind of got ahead of the curve this year. Your store is packed with, I can't tell you right now, I mean, because we're on the radio, but I can tell you that, or on the podcast, I can tell you that it's an unbelievable amount of inventory you have.
Sure. Yeah. We did some forecasting based off of customer needs last year, and being in the industry for over 22 years now, I have some great contacts, and then you just start leaning on those customer relations and the contacts and making educated decisions. They're big decisions because they're expensive, but right now I've got over 40 trolling motors at Mon-Dak.
Wow.
In all configurations, and I've got over 75 graphs at Mon-Dak right now. So, we've got it, and that's super nice for a customer to come in and want to push the buttons on a Helix 15 or a Lowrance Live 12, or even in the Garmin EcoMap side of things. We've got those in all of the forward-facing systems, because that's where everybody, when they're looking at graphs today, they all want to know about the live imagery. And can I tell you which one is better than the other? Well, I have to ask a few questions. Do you already have a Humminbird? Well, I can't sell you a live scope or an active target because it won't work. So
Right.
Yeah, we do have a lot of inventory.
So, Matt, lastly here, our podcast is heard all around the world. Now, granted, most of our folks are right around the Montana area, but you'd be surprised how many different cities all across the United States and even other areas. And right now, I mean, I can just feel it. Our audience, after listening to you, say, well, man, I live in Denver, but I want that guy. He just knows everything about it. How difficult is it for you to help someone that's, say in Denver instead of there in Glasgow?
It's not very tough at all with today's technology. If it's something to where I need to see what scenarios they have in their boat, well, let's do a message call where I can get you and I can see you, you can see me, you can kind of tell me what you're doing. They're all the Humminbirds or Lowrances or Garmins in Montana are the same everywhere. And we can figure it out, and, we just ship it with all the right things. But I promise you, when we build the system, you're going to have everything you need to make it work correctly, because there's nothing worse than getting all this new fancy stuff and missing a $30 part that makes it all work. Right. So you're going to get it. And if you need help putting it in over the phone, again, I can help you do that too.
And it's Mon-Dak Marine in Glasgow, Montana, not Scotland.
Yeah, correct.
And so when you Google it, you got to make sure you put MT on the end of Glasgow. But more importantly, when we're talking about rigging a boat, it's Go Fish Installations. Both are owned by Matt and Stephanie Cowen. And there's not very many guys that will give out their cell phone number for customer service purposes. And Matt's one of them. And he's helped me out in a pinch many a times. If you're on Fort Peck or you're fishing Fort Peck, I mean, I can just see people that come from Minnesota, they come from South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa. They might want to upgrade their electronics when they come here because of the knowledge that you have. You're the best in the business, and we're lucky to have a guy like you in Montana.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It means a lot.
What's the best way to get a hold of you, Matt?
Well, you can get a hold of me at Mon-Dak. Again, that's 406-228-2900. And my cell number is 406-670-2645. I'm warning you now, my voicemail fills up real fast. On my personal cell side, it's going to be way quicker for communications to shoot me a quick text. I will get back to you and give you a call, or we'll figure it out.
I will tell you this. Years ago, Taylor Michaels was with him behind the Lake Ridge Lodging and Bait Shop. And Taylor works for Jason Mitchell Outdoors. Matt had his boat parked there. And I thought that, I thought it was George Jones, as excited as he was, or, of course, I'd be excited. Of course, I guess I would really be excited if I saw George Jones since he passed away. But you know what I'm saying? This guy has an aura about him, and it's a reason he's got an aura about him is because he's accessible and he's there. He uses the equipment, and he just knows it, and the people will get it. I mean, if I can learn the basics, and I have, and I can ward off downrigger Dale in my boat, anybody can do that.
Yeah, if you can teach
I appreciate
me how to
it, guys.
And Manny, in just a second, is going to give you my email address. A lot of you that listen to the show on a regular basis already know it, downrigger@montanooutdoor.com. You can always use that, and I'll get those messages passed on to Matt, too. So, Matt, thank you so much for spending all this time with us. I mean, we could probably do about 4 or 5 shows with you, but this was just fantastic information. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
All right, gang, there you have it. Let's get your boat outfitted. Let's get you out there and have some fun and catch the fish the way you want to do it. Get around the lake the way you want to do it. It's all waiting for you. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and we'll see you out on the water soon.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.